Tom strolled through the front door of his country home at mid-morning on Wednesday. He hadn't been there since last Sunday. He was just looking to grab a couple of things before heading out again. He expected his wife, Peggy, to be off to work. Tom went into the kitchen to make a cup of coffee and noticed the handcuffs and strip of duct tape still lying on the table where he had left them. The kitchen towel was still lying on the floor where he had thrown it after wiping his face. The video camera was still on its tripod next to the table. He went to the kitchen table. The chair he had broken and knocked over was still on the floor. Instead of making a cup of coffee, he opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of Diet Coke. "Where on earth have you been?" Peggy asked, sounding a bit concerned as she entered the kitchen. Tom didn't look at her and didn't answer. He walked past her into the bedroom to gather some clothes, but she grabbed his arm. "I asked you a question," she said, her voice a soft blend of anger and concern. Tom stopped and turned to look at her. The woman he had married 7 years ago. The woman he loved. But now the woman who had devastated him. "Let me go," he said gently.
This is your story channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join us to stay updated with more real stories happening around you.
"Let me go," he said gently. Peg looked at him with a soft, concerned expression. There was no expression on his face. Tom's eyes looked tired and empty. She let go of his hand and let him pass. Peg picked up the handcuffs, duct tape and kitchen towel, then walked over to the trash can and unceremoniously tossed them in there. She then went over to the tripod and unscrewed the mounting bracket, placing the camcorder on the table. She folded the tripod and placed it next to her. Peggy headed for the bedroom. Tom had a large open suitcase on the bed and was packing. "What are you up to, Tom?" she asked playfully. "I'm packing," he answered, and continued. "Another business trip then?" she asked playfully. "No," he replied, a playful smile spreading across his face. "So, where are you headed?" she asked, her tone filled with curiosity. Tom paused and looked at her, his face expressing a warm smile. His face was still blank. "What does it matter? You're my husband. I have a right to know." "Peg, you gave up that right last Sunday afternoon." Tom added a few more things to the bag and closed it. He picked it up and carried it into the living room, set it by the door, and then headed for the study. Peggy followed him. He put some papers from the desk into his briefcase and closed it, then carefully packed the laptop and power cord into the computer bag. Tom strolled over to the kitchen table and picked up the video camera. He opened it, delighted to find the SD card still in place. "Is this what you recorded on Sunday?" Peggy smiled warmly. "A memento of your paper." Tom remained calm. That's very thoughtful." "Thank you," Peggy said, her voice filled with excitement. "Tom, my dear, please talk to me." Tom looked at her. His face flashed. "What have I done to deserve this?" "Why are you leaving?" she asked, her voice warm and reassuring. "Peg, please sit at the table with me." Tom opened his computer bag and placed the laptop on the table, then sat down in front of it. He gestured for Peggy to sit next to him. Once she was seated, he inserted the SD card into the slot. "Let's take a look at this together. Then we'll have a conversation." Tom started the tape. The video showed a chair pushed to the side, away from the kitchen table on the right, and an empty kitchen table on the left. "Welcome home, baby," he said with a warm smile. "Come on in, let's have a seat. I have a special surprise for you that I promised on the phone." Tom walked out on the stage, a warm smile on his face. Peggy walked up to him, dressed in a short, thin robe. Her hair and makeup were immaculate, and her feet were barefoot. She held the handcuffs in her hands and smiled. "Please sit down in the chair," he said kindly. Tom smiled warmly at her. Peggy went behind the chair and squatted down to gently cuff him. Her robe fell open, revealing nothing underneath. She slid one wrist into the cuff, looped the chain through the back of the chair, then secured the other wrist. Peggy then stepped out of the frame, but came back a moment later and covered his mouth with a strip of duct tape. Even with the duct tape, his smile was still easy to see. She stood in front of him and dropped her robe to the floor. Tom's eyes widened with delight at the sight before him. "Are you ready for your surprise?" she asked, smiling. Tom nodded, his face lighting up with joy. We're all set here, she called out. A moment later, footsteps were heard approaching them. Tom turned his head at the sound. A man dressed in Tom's robe entered the room. Tom's warm smile faltered, and a look of surprise replaced it. Honey, this is Joey from my work. Peggy walked over to Joey and untied the belt on the robe, then pulled it off his shoulders and tossed it into Tom's lap. Joey was naked under the robe. Tom paused the video and looked at Peggy. Why? You know exactly why. Peggy, I don't know what's going on. Tom, however, remained calm and collected. Before we got married, I told you I'd do it. Tom was puzzled. Your words didn't make any sense. What did it all mean? Before we got married, I told you that if you ever cheated on me, I would sleep with you in revenge and do it right in front of you. Do you remember that? Is that what this is all about? Is this your way of getting even? I promised and I delivered, she said, as if nothing had happened. Do you think I cheated on you? I know you cheated on me, but I'll ask you again. Peggy, when did I ever do that to you? Don't try to make me believe you. You know exactly when, where, and with whom. Tom pulled out the SD card and put it in his bag. He closed the laptop and slipped it into his bag, then zipped it up. He turned to face Peggy. Tell me what you're talking about, or I'm out of here. Tom was upset. Okay, don't act innocent. While you were on that business trip last week, I got a call from Jerry's wife, Jill. She told me that you and Jerry spent the week in bed with a couple of whores. Jill told you that? She did. What proof did she give you? Hey, let's be real here, Tom. You know what you did, Peg. So, in a moment of retaliation, you chose to sleep with me in front of me based on a phone call from someone I trust. Yeah, I did it. It was all based on her word, and there wasn't any actual proof. I didn't need any evidence. Peg, you put handcuffs on me and slept with a man right in front of me, humiliating me all based on what someone told you. It was all about getting even. That's exactly what I did. Tom shook his head, still puzzled. You didn't tell me why. You didn't talk to me about it. You decided I was guilty and deserved to be punished. And then you carried it out without any evidence at all? Yes, so now we're even. Even? Yeah, even. I know it probably doesn't matter now, but I wanted to say a couple of things. Go ahead. I'm listening. I was at a conference all last week. Jerry wasn't even there. He was let go from the band a couple months back for something he did, and I haven't had the pleasure of seeing or talking to him since. I was a speaker at a conference. I sat at a table on stage from 7 in the morning to 10 at night every day of the conference. The entire week was videotaped. After the sessions, the group would meet daily until midnight to discuss and plan the next day. I have several witnesses who can confirm that I was there. I didn't leave the hotel until I went to the airport after it was over. So, it seems a bit far-fetched to claim I was somewhere else. I'm sorry, but I don't believe you. I have proof of where I was and what I was doing the whole time, and you have a phone call from someone who wasn't even there as proof. It seems like a pretty weak case to me. I believe her, though. Remember, just because we believe something doesn't mean it's true. I used to think I was married to the most wonderful, loving woman in the world. But then something happened on Sunday that made me realize that I'm actually married to a woman with flaws and who doesn't see me in a good light. She's put me through some tough times, both physically and emotionally, even though there's never been any solid proof of her wrongdoing. Peggy didn't respond. I'm heading out now. You'll hear from my attorney in the next few days. I'm not going to divorce you. This whole situation has been really tough on us, and I want to make sure you know that I'm not going to let this get in the way of our relationship. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, and I hope we can move past this and be friends again. Peggy, I promise I didn't cheat on you. Weren't you listening? I'm not stupid. Of course I listened. I'm sorry, but I can't accept what you did as justified. I understand. If we're at an impasse, then I guess we can stop talking. Why don't you just give Jill a call and find out what evidence she had? I'd really like to know. But honestly, that's not really the point right now. Without another word, Tom walked out of the house. He went to his hotel room and burned the video onto 3 DVDs. Tom had already made an appointment with his attorney and went to the place where he had started the divorce proceedings. The reason for filing would be adultery. He gave a copy of the DVD to his attorney. The prenuptial agreement would be valid and supported by the evidence on the DVD. Tom was so kind and thoughtful. He even handed the documents to Peggy himself when they were filed. The attorney offered some great suggestions on financial matters that needed to be taken care of right away, and Tom took care of them as soon as he left the attorney's office. His cell phone was on silent mode, and when he got to his hotel room, he checked it. The first call from Peggy came in about 5 minutes after he left, and then there was a 2-hour silence. After that, calls came in about every 5 minutes or so. He listened to one voice message, the first one after the 2-hour break. "Oh my God, Tom. I finally got through to Jill. She was drunk. Please give me a call. I made a mistake. Please call me." Tom felt so bad that he deleted all her calls and voicemails without listening, and then deleted her text messages and emails. But the calls, texts, and emails kept coming. He reviewed the numbers as the calls came in. Tom also got calls from Peggy's father, mother, and sister. He called Sean, her father, back. "Hey Sean, it's Tom. I know who the hell it is. You're not the only one who can read, you know. What did you do to my daughter?" "I didn't do anything to her except not return her calls." "Oh my goodness, she's in hysterics. What's going on?" "Sean, if you're curious about the situation, I'd be happy to fill you in. Just give Peggy a ring." "I'm talking to you, my friend." He was upset. "I'm sorry, but I think you're wasting your time. Talk to her." "Tom, please stay." He remained calm and civil to him. He asked, "Did you sleep with someone or something?" "Talk to Peggy. You son of a bitch. I come over and give you a good talking to, but I'm afraid I'd probably end up kicking your ass." "Sean, please listen to me. If you're curious about what happened, Peggy would be the best person to ask. I'm not going to discuss this with you, Mary, or anyone else. Talk to Peggy." "I'm sorry, Sean, but it seems you really cheated on her." "I'm sorry, Sean, but I'm going to have to end the call here." Tom ended the call. Sean called back almost immediately, but Tom ignored him. Then Mary called and her mother called too. Sean deleted their voicemails, then went to dinner and returned to his room for the night. On Thursday morning, he bought a new cell phone, but kept his old one as well. He went to his office and took an extended vacation. He also gave them his new number, but asked them not to share it. When he arrived at the far end of town, he rented a small furnished apartment and signed a 6-month lease. Tom went to the grocery store for groceries and household supplies. By the end of the day, he had the house all set up and ready for his return. On Friday morning, his lawyer called. They met at the courthouse where he signed the papers. After filing, he was given a copy for Peggy. While her copy didn't require a signature, the attorney kindly advised him to ensure there was an impartial witness to the service. Tom called Peggy, and they arranged to meet for lunch at a favorite restaurant. When Peggy arrived, Tom was already waiting for her at a quiet table at the back of the room. She was dressed and made up in a duffel. Peggy looked well. As she approached, he stood up. Peggy put her arms around him, and when she tried to kiss him, he only put up his cheek. It wasn't what Peggy had hoped for, and it was clear from the look on her face. She took a seat at the table, her back to him. "Tom, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I want us to put it behind us and move forward." He agreed. It's time to move forward. Tom graciously refused the waiter's assistance. It was Lynn. They had been friends for a long time. "What can I get you to drink?" she asked, smiling warmly. "Just 2 Diet Cokes, please," Peggy replied. "Lynn, wait a minute," Tom said kindly. He gently took the divorce papers from her, then handed them to Peggy. "Peggy, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but these are the divorce papers," he said. "Lynn is my witness that you have been notified." "Thank you, Lynn," Peggy said, her face pale as she looked at the papers. Lynn went to get their drinks. "Tom, you said you wanted to put this behind you and move forward. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm moving forward. But Tom, I made a mistake. I didn't mean that. Peggy, we've been married for over 7 years. Until Sunday, they were the most wonderful years of my life. I've loved you like I've never loved anyone, and I'm sure I never will again. Don't throw that away, Tom. We had such a great marriage. It really was. It won't be. Last Sunday you made a mistake, and as a result, our marriage and my love are now over. I made a mistake. I'm not sure I understand. When I look at you or close my eyes, I see so many things. I see the woman I loved. I see her on the table in front of me, enjoying herself, and hearing her tell me how much better a lover I am. That's what I see now, Peggy. I don't see the woman I cared about. You killed her that day, Peggy. But Tom, it was all a mistake. No, it was deliberate. The reason you did it was a mistake, not the act itself. I remember saying that if you cheated on me, I would have revenge sex in front of you. You knew what would happen and you even agreed to it. I did it knowing it would never come to that. Peggy, I'm so worried. I'm worried because I don't know what to tell you if you cheated on me. Peggy lowered her gaze to the table. You said you'd divorce me. Did you agree to that? Yes, but I promise I didn't cheat on you. Tom gently held out a DVD to her. This is for you. It's a copy of your not cheating thing with Joey. Tom, it wasn't cheating. It was all part of a plan to get back at Joey. Lynn returned with their drinks and took their lunch orders. Peggy, I understand your confusion. Sex outside of marriage is considered adultery, and unless both parties agree to it, it is considered cheating. We can work this out, Tom. We'll talk to a therapist. No, Peg, we can't. You showed me the side of you that destroyed the woman I loved. You hurt her deeply, as if you had taken out her heart. But you didn't. Instead, you hurt me so deeply that I'm left with no heart to love. I'm sorry, Peg, but I don't want a divorce. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to fight you. On Sunday, you showed me a different side of you, and I'd like to think that I have another side, too. But I guess you don't want to see it. What other side? The side where I become as vicious, indifferent, and evil as you were on Sunday. I'm not going to use a mistake as an excuse. I'll take full responsibility for my actions. I know you're not like that, and I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. That's funny. I was thinking the same thing about you. Oh, Tom, I understand that this was a mistake. No, it was a deliberate act of revenge. What did you tell your parents? I let them know we had a little disagreement and that we'd work it out. A fight about what? Peggy looked down at the table and said nothing. About what, Peggy? I told them you were having an affair. You never told them the truth. No, why not? They just wouldn't understand, would they? What are you talking about? They just didn't realize it was a mistake. I think I'm finally starting to understand. Tom, I know I messed up. I let my emotions run the show more than reason. I know I hurt you deeply, but we can get past this. We can rebuild our marriage. We can move past this and move forward. Let's put our marriage behind us and move forward together. The woman I love, the one I want to spend my life with, no longer exists. I'll fight for us, but I'm doing it to save our marriage. I know there's nothing left to save, but I'll do everything I can to make it work. It's finished. I'm begging you, please don't make me reveal my other side. I'm afraid you might not like it. You're bluffing. Don't push it, Peggy. I'd suggest getting a lawyer. Ask them to review the petition. If you have any questions, they can contact my lawyer for you. You'll be single in 90 days, and you can have as much Joey as you want. This has nothing to do with you. Joey, I'm sorry. I was out of line. I'm sorry, and I apologize. I promise I'm not leaving you. Peg, you've already made your own decision. I think the settlement is fair. Please accept it and move on. I'm sorry, but I can't. Lynn brought them food. Tom was kind enough to give her his credit card. She walked away, and a moment later, she returned with a check for his signature. Tom signed it, then stood up. He hadn't even touched his food yet. Enjoy your meal, Peggy, he said kindly. I lost my appetite last Sunday when you spit on me. Tom left and went to his house. On Tuesday, Peggy had her first meeting with her lawyer. Peggy was a bit of a tough nut to crack, but her friend recommended her to me. Please have a seat, Mrs. Givens. My name is Ronnie Savage. How can I help you? My husband's trying to divorce me. Has he served you with papers? Last Friday. May I take a look at them? Peggy held out the papers to her. Ronnie looked at the first page. He's citing adultery. Is that true? No, it was a misunderstanding. You had sex with someone other than your husband. Yes, but it was a mistake. Did your husband agree to you having sex with another person? Not with this person specifically, but he was cool with it if he cheated on me. So, you had some revenge sex after your husband cheated on you? Well, yes and no. Mrs. Givens, could you please clarify that for me? I did have revenge sex, but then I found out he wasn't cheating on me. Your husband wasn't cheating, but you still had revenge sex. I did, Mrs. Givens. It's called adultery. I thought he was cheating, but I was wrong. What evidence did you have? A friend told me he did it, but it seems your friend was mistaken. Yes, it's great to finally have someone see that it was a mistake. Mrs. Givens, based on what you've told me, it seems like I'm dating a woman who had revenge sex with her husband based on hearsay evidence. Does he have proof that you have? Did he have sex with another man? Yes, I handcuffed him to a chair and made him watch. Then it's his word against yours. Is there any real evidence? I videotaped the whole thing. Do you have a copy of that video? Peggy held out the DVD that Tom had given her on Friday. Can I watch it? Peggy nodded. Ronnie put the DVD into the player, and after watching only a few minutes, she stopped it. I'll watch the whole thing, but I can do that later. Let me just take a look at the petition first. She began to read it. After a few minutes, after flipping through a few pages, Ronnie looked up. I see that you signed a prenuptial agreement, and at first glance, he seems pretty solid when it comes to adultery. If he were to change the wording of the complaint to irreconcilable differences, we could avoid that part. I suspect that. I know it won't be easy, but I'm here to help. Even with the pre-up, he's offering you a lot more than the law requires. Without a pre-up, you might be able to get a much bigger cash payment. I'm not looking for a cash payout, and I don't want a divorce. All I want is to bring my husband back into our family. Did you mention that to him? He didn't even bat an eye. Divorces can be really expensive for everyone involved. If we try counseling, it could be beneficial for both of us. Let's give it a try. We can seek counseling and let him know that if he refuses, we'll fight for everything. Okay. Do you have any information that could be used against your husband? Do you have any information that could be used against your husband? Anything at all? He's as innocent as can be. Has he ever been violent or threatened you? He never raised his voice to me. I'll take a look at the paperwork, watch the video, and get back to you in a day or two. Does he have a copy of that DVD? Peggy nodded. It was Wednesday when Ronnie called her. Mrs. Givens, I'm sorry to say that he has a pretty solid case. The video you recorded is very damaging, and you don't want any judge to see it. Let's start with what we've been discussing. We're going to offer 6 weeks of family counseling. Whatever it takes, I want my husband back. 2 days later, Tom's lawyer called him and asked him to come in. He went to the office that afternoon. Tom, they've requested 6 weeks of couples counseling. What if I say no? They'll do everything they can to fight us. I'm not sure how I feel about it. What do you think? She hired Ronnie Savage. She's one of the best. Is she better than you? I'm the best. Are you up for a friendly sparring match? I'm ready to put my best self out there, teeth and all. Let's just say no and see what happens. Keep me posted, okay? That night, Tom called Peggy. Peggy, I've decided to stop counseling. I told you that if you argue with me about it, you'll see another side of me that you won't like. Why are you acting this way? I'm doing my best to work through this divorce and come home to you. Peg, I'm sorry, but that's just not going to happen. This is your last chance to get off easy. I won't call you anymore. I'm trying to be the bigger person here, Tom, but I'm struggling. I don't want a divorce. Go ahead and have it your way. Tom ended the call. The following Monday, Peggy filed a countersuit, citing irreconcilable differences. She asked for everything. 2 days later, the local school board and the school where Peggy worked were served documents alleging relationship violations between their 2 married teachers, Peggy Givens and Joseph Carr. The documents included some sensitive photos of the 2 of them. The school board called an emergency meeting to discuss the situation, and they made the difficult decision to let both teachers go. That same day, Joey's wife received a DVD in the mail with the names and phone numbers of those in the video. She called Tom after watching the video. Hi, this is Tom Givens. This is Tammy Carr, Joey's wife. I'm wondering if you might have sent me that DVD. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, but I thought you had a right to know. When was this made? A week ago, Sunday at my house. Is that you sitting in the chair? Yes, that's me. And the video is real. Totally. It's not edited. Is this woman your wife? I'm sorry, but for the moment, I filed for divorce. That's all I needed to know. I'm so sorry to bother you. Tammy ended the call. Tammy's next call was to a divorce attorney. The next day, Joey called Peggy and said he was sorry for what had happened, but he was worried that his actions had cost him his job and maybe even his marriage. Despite this, Peggy refused to give up. When another week passed and Tom still hadn't said anything, Tom decided to do something. Peggy's parents and sister got a copy of the DVD in the mail. After a short introduction to the video, they started asking Peggy questions and giving her some friendly advice. At that moment, Tom's old cell phone rang. He picked up and his sister greeted him. How could you, Tom? Peggy loves you. Mandy. She has a strange way of showing it. It was just some revenge sex, for God's sake. So she still hasn't told you the truth. What do you mean, the truth? Mandy, I wasn't having an affair. She got a call from a friend who said I did. She took it as truth, even though there was no proof. Do you think maybe she was trying to get revenge? Tom, I think Peggy's actually pretty smart. You should really ask her yourself. Tell her that if she lets the divorce go through and stops fighting it, that's the end of it. If she keeps going, that's just the beginning. Can't you find a way to deal with this? Have you watched the DVD? It's just the beginning, and I could barely watch it. Take a look at all of this, and then ask yourself if your husband is willing to try to make things right. Would you do that? I will, but I think you should at least try to work it out. Mandy, you and I have known each other since we were kids. You know I'm not a bad guy. Please watch the DVD. Okay, I'll do that. Mandy ended the call. An hour later, she called back. Oh, Tom, I'm so sorry. I understand now, but I still need to talk to Peggy. I'll make sure she knows that if she's willing to stop fighting the divorce, we can move forward with finalizing it. If she keeps fighting, it'll only get worse. I'll make sure she knows. Mandy went to see Peggy in person, and after getting confirmation that Tom was telling the truth, relayed his warning. Peggy was determined in her refusal. Mandy then went and told her parents about what Peggy had done and how Tom insisted that she drop the countersuit. Peggy's parents visited her that night and got copies of both documents. Sean had a family friend who was the attorney who reviewed the documents and the pre-up. He suggested that Peggy do exactly what Tom said and quietly take the matter to divorce court. Peggy was still determined to keep fighting. After a week had passed with no word from Tom's attorney, he decided to take the next step. Peggy taught Sunday school at the same church as her parents, and every member of the women's auxiliary and the ministers received a flyer in the mail. The flyer had pictures of Peggy and a man who was not her husband, and it read, "Should this woman be teaching your children?" On Sunday, Peggy's parents were treated more like lepers than parishioners. After the service, the pastor took them aside for a private conversation and explained why. He also gave them a letter for Peggy, informing them that her services would no longer be needed or even welcomed. He kindly included a copy of the flyer with it. When Peggy got it, she cried, but she still refused to drop her counterclaim. Peggy confided in her lawyer about what Tom had done. Telling and showing her family was not a crime. Peggy told Tom that she made the tape for him, and it was clear from the DVD that she had. Since it was his property, she thought it would be nice for him to share it with anyone he wanted. The flyers were sent out anonymously, so without a thorough investigation, they couldn't be traced back to Tom. Ronnie suggested that Peggy drop her countersuit, and Peggy's family begged her to do so, saying it was affecting their lives. Sean called Tom to talk about it and share his concerns. Tom repeated his demand to Sean. Peggy insisted that she was right. A few days later, Peggy's neighbors and all their friends received similar flyers, signed only with Peggy's name and contact information. Peggy's phone and email were flooded with calls and messages. Things got so bad that someone even dumped trash on her car, driveway, and lawn. Tom waited another week before posting on her social media accounts. It started with insinuations, and then it got worse. Then, photos with blackouts strategically placed in all the right places started showing up online. A few days later, Peggy received an email from a porn site thanking her for the video. When a news crew showed up at her door, she finally called her lawyer and withdrew the countersuit. She asked for a meeting between her and Tom. Tom agreed to the meeting, but only if it was at his attorney's office. They met a few days later. Peggy looked like a shadow of her former self. She had lost weight, and it was clear she was also sleep-deprived. Tom sat down at the table across from her and said, "Peggy, I've dropped the countersuit. You won." "No, Peggy, I lost. I lost the woman I loved. I lost my marriage. I lost everything that was important to me. There's a side of you that I've never seen before. I'm sorry you had to see it. Peggy, I'm at a loss for words. I'm so embarrassed. I can't even show my face anywhere. I'd have to leave even to get a job. I can't stay here either. It's so hard when everyone we know treats me like I'm a leper. We've both lost everything, haven't we?" "Yes, Peg, we did." Tom's eyes were brimming with tears. "I know it's too late now, but is there anything I can do to undo what I've done, besides figuring out how to turn back time?" "Yeah, besides that, I don't think so, Peggy." Tom stood up, getting ready to leave. Peggy stood up and held out her arms for one last hug. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. Tom took a step toward her, then stopped. Tears ran down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Peggy. I can't do that. It would feel like I was cheating on the woman I love." He paused for a moment, looking at her, then turned and went to the door. When his hand touched the doorknob, he turned back to her. "I think there's something that might help." "What is it, Tom?" "Just say, 'I'm sorry' one time, Peggy." Tom walked out of the office and out of her life,